The familiar creak of the wooden stairs announced my ascent to the lookout tower for the beginning of my night shift. I entered the circular observation room, my home for the next 12 hours. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of pine forest, stretching to the horizon. The panorama should have been comforting. It usually was. But something felt wrong. I set my backpack down and immediately noticed the silence. The usual sounds of birds that accompanied dusk had diminished to occasional, hesitant chirps. Even the wind, moving through millions of pine needles, seemed muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. "Standard procedure, Maya," I muttered to myself, falling back on training to calm my nerves. I retrieved my binoculars and began the first scan of my shift, methodically checking each sector according to protocol. The eastern ridge looked normal, dark green slopes under a purple bruised sky. But Carter's words echoed in my mind. "Watch it carefully." My radio crackled, making me jump. "Lookout 7, this is dispatch. Radio check, over." I recognized Sam's voice, but it sounded strange, distant and slightly warped, like a cassette tape stretched too thin. "Dispatch, this is Lookout 7. Reading you, over." My own voice sounded steadier than I felt. "All quiet so far, Maya. Standard night watch protocol. Out." The static lingered a beat too long before cutting off. I moved to the desk where Carter would have spent his day. His logbook lay open, and I frowned at what I saw. Where Carter normally filled pages with meticulous observations, wildlife sightings, weather patterns, hiker movements, the past week showed entries growing increasingly sparse. Today's entry consisted of just 3 words. "They're getting closer." Carter had been acting strangely during our shift overlaps all week. This morning, I'd found him standing at the eastern window, binoculars hanging around his neck, simply staring and whispering words I couldn't make out. When I'd asked what he saw, he'd startled as if I'd woken him from sleepwalking. "Nothing, just tired," he'd said, rubbing his eyes. "Double shift yesterday." But before leaving, he'd gripped my shoulder hard enough to leave an impression. "Watch the eastern ridge carefully tonight," he'd said, his blue eyes intense and bloodshot. The memory made me shiver despite the summer evening. I moved to check my equipment. Radio tested and functioning, emergency flares stocked and dry, first aid kit complete. The tower felt unusually cold. I checked the small wall thermometer, 68 degrees inside, 72 outside. The numbers made no sense. A dark shape draped over the back of Carter's chair caught my eye. His leather jacket. I picked it up, frowning. Carter never forgot his jacket. It had belonged to his father. I hesitated before checking the pockets. Finding nothing in the right side, I tried the left and felt paper. I withdrew a crumpled note with a series of numbers that looked like coordinates scribbled in Carter's handwriting. Below the numbers was a strange symbol. A circle with lines radiating outward but with unusual markings between the lines that I didn't recognize. I moved to the map table and traced the coordinates with my finger until I found the location. My stomach tightened. The spot was in the northeast sector, deep in privately owned land marked in red on our maps. Off-limits to hikers, rangers, and lookouts alike. Black Ridge Research Station owned those acres. I set the note aside, unsettled but determined to focus. Outside, the last purple light of dusk faded to black. My night watch had begun, and whatever Carter had seen, or thought he'd seen, I needed to remain alert. I picked up my binoculars again and trained them on the eastern ridge. Hours passed as darkness consumed the forest. I maintained my methodical scan of each sector, fighting the growing tedium that came with night watch. The eastern ridge remained my primary focus despite the absence of any unusual activity. At midnight, I rose from the desk to stretch my legs. The forest had settled into its nighttime rhythm. Occasional owl calls punctuated the otherwise perfect stillness. I completed another standard scan, moving my binoculars systematically across each quadrant. Then suddenly I saw it. A flicker of light caught my eye. I froze, adjusting the focus on my binoculars. There it was again. A distinct light source in the eastern sector. Too steady for a campfire, too isolated for a hiker. The light pulsed with mathematical precision, exactly 3 seconds between each brightening. No natural fire behaved this way. I reached for Carter's note and the sector map. The coordinates he had scribbled matched precisely with the location of the light. My skin prickled with goosebumps. Whatever Carter had been fixated on was there, right now, sending out rhythmic pulses of light into the darkness. I grabbed my radio, pressing the transmission button firmly. "Dispatch, this is Lookout 7. I have a visual on an unknown light source in the eastern sector. Grid coordinates Echo 9. Possible unauthorized campfire. Over." Sam's response came after an unusually long pause. "Lookout 7. Can you confirm the exact location?" "Over." I checked the map again, matching the pulsing light to Carter's coordinates. "Confirmed location is approximately 2 miles east of Black Ridge Creek, half-mile north of the old fire break. Appears to be on Black Ridge Research property." "Over." The radio remained silent for nearly 30 seconds. I checked to ensure it was still functioning. "Dispatch, do you copy? Over." "There shouldn't be anyone in that area," Sam finally responded, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "It's private property owned by New Dawn Research. No camping permits issued." The silence stretched again. "Maya, do not investigate. I repeat, do not leave your post. I'll send a ground team at first light." The urgency in Sam's voice sparked immediate suspicion. I'd reported dozens of potential campfires over 3 years, and Sam had never reacted with this level of concern. "What's in that area, Sam?" The radio emitted only static. I waited, watching the pulsing light continue its perfect 3-second cycle. "Sam, what's out there?" The static cleared abruptly. "Probably nothing. Just protocol for that zone. Stay put. Get some rest if you can, but maintain a regular observation schedule. Dispatch out." His tone had shifted dramatically, artificially casual, deliberately unconcerned. The sudden change only intensified my unease. I returned to my binoculars, focusing on the light. Unlike a campfire, it didn't flicker or waver. Each pulse brightened to the same intensity, held for exactly 1 second, and then dimmed for 2 before repeating. The surrounding trees cast long, unnatural shadows that stretched and contracted with each pulse. I documented everything in the logbook, drawing diagrams of the light pattern and noting the precise timing. Hours passed, but the light remained constant, never growing stronger or weaker, never deviating from its rhythm. No natural phenomenon I knew behaved this way. By 3 a.m., my eyes burned from constant observation, but I couldn't look away. The mathematical precision of the pulses suggested purpose, communication. Each flash seemed directed outward, or perhaps upward, from the forest. The coordinates on Carter's note matched too perfectly to be a coincidence. He had seen this before. The strange symbol he had drawn below the coordinates, a circle with marked radiating lines, now seemed less like random doodling and more like an attempt to document what he had observed. Despite Sam's warning, I couldn't shake the feeling that understanding what happened in that restricted area was crucial. The pulsing light continued its broadcast into the night, and as I watched, a disturbing sensation crept over me. The unsettling feeling that while I observed the light, something behind that light was watching me in return. I had watched the pulsing light until dawn broke over the eastern ridge. Even after it faded with the morning light, I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. The next evening came quickly. I had spent most of the day reviewing weather patterns, skipping lunch to pore over historical data that might explain the strange atmospheric conditions around the eastern ridge. My stomach growled in protest as I climbed the familiar wooden stairs to begin another night shift. I pushed open the door to find Carter already inside the tower. This was unexpected. His shift should have ended hours ago. He stood at the table with 2 plastic containers of food steaming in the cool air. "Thought you might want some company tonight," Carter said. His smile looked strained, not quite reaching the corners of his eyes. The contrast with yesterday's behavior struck me immediately. Where he had been distant and almost trance-like, Now he appeared overly friendly. "Thanks," I said, surveying the spread of what looked like pasta and garlic bread. "I'm starving." The aroma of tomato sauce and garlic filled the small space. I sat down across from him, genuinely grateful for the meal despite my suspicion. My hunger overrode caution. "Weather's been strange lately," Carter remarked, twirling pasta around his fork. "Pressure systems aren't following normal patterns." I nodded, watching him carefully. "I noticed that too. Been looking at the data all day." Carter maintained a steady stream of conversation about mundane topics, trail maintenance schedules, a new family of hawks nesting near the fire road, and equipment that needed replacement. Yet every few minutes, his gaze drifted toward the eastern window, toward the ridge that held the pulsing light I'd seen the night before. After his fifth glance toward the east, I decided to test him. I waited for a natural lull in conversation before speaking. "I saw a strange light last night," I mentioned, keeping my tone deliberately casual. I pointed through the window to the exact location. Right about there. Carter's fork froze midway to his mouth. The pasta dangled for a moment before sliding back to his plate. "What kind of light?" he asked, his voice suddenly tight with intensity. I described the precise pattern, the 3-second pulses. Carter's expression transformed. The forced casualness fell away, replaced by a mixture of fear and fascination that reminded me of his behavior yesterday morning. His eyes widened, pupils dilating visibly even in the tower's bright light. "We should check it out," he suggested, leaning forward. An unusual eagerness colored his voice. "Together?" "Sam explicitly told me not to," I countered, studying his reaction. "Said it's on private property." Carter's hand clenched around his plastic fork, bending it slightly. "Sam doesn't understand." He pushed his half-eaten meal aside and leaned even closer. "I've seen it before. It's been calling me." His voice dropped to a whisper, nearly reverent. "Don't you want to know what's out there? What's changing our forest?" A chill ran down my spine. The look in Carter's eyes reminded me of religious zealots I'd encountered. Absolute conviction mingled with desperate need. As he gestured emphatically, his sleeve pulled back, revealing a mark on his inner wrist that made my breath catch. Drawn in black ink was a symbol identical to the one I'd found on Carter's note, a circle with marked radiating lines. "What's that on your wrist?" I asked. Carter glanced down, surprise flashing across his face. He quickly pulled down his sleeve to cover the mark. "Nothing. Just a doodle," he said, his tone suddenly defensive. "Look, we should head out after dinner. It'll take about 2 hours to hike there if we move quickly." The rational part of my brain screamed warnings. Carter was clearly not himself. The symbol, his fixation on the light, and the sudden personality shifts all pointed to something profoundly wrong. Yet beneath my concern lurked a growing curiosity that I couldn't suppress. "Okay," I agreed, surprising myself. "Let me grab my gear." I moved to collect my backpack, radio, and flashlight, all while watching Carter from the corner of my eye. He stood at the eastern window, staring into the gathering darkness, his fingertips pressed against the glass like someone testing the boundary of another world. Something was clearly happening to Carter, and the pulsing light in the eastern ridge seemed to be the key. Despite my better judgment, I needed to understand what drew him to that section of the forest. I watched Carter pack his backpack. The same man who'd appeared disoriented and trance-like yesterday morning now moved with unnerving purpose. Night was falling quickly. After our dinner and my unexpected agreement to investigate the light, Carter had immediately sprung into action. "Take extra batteries," Carter said, tossing me a sealed package. "And water. At least 2 bottles." I slipped the batteries into my pack alongside my flashlight, compass, first aid kit, and protein bars. My ranger training had ingrained these basics into me, but something felt fundamentally wrong about preparing for this expedition. The tower was my post. Abandoning it went against every protocol. "Ready?" Carter stood by the door, his own pack secured, a flashlight already glowing in his hand. I nodded, though I felt anything but ready. The weight of my radio pressed against my hip, a constant reminder of my professional obligation. Sam's warning echoed in my mind. Do not investigate. I shouldered my pack anyway. We descended the wooden stairs in silence, each step creaking beneath our boots. The familiar sound now felt like accusations. The forest stretched before us, darker and more foreboding than I had ever seen it. The moment we stepped beyond the clearing surrounding the tower, the atmosphere changed. The forest had always been a source of comfort for me. Now it felt alien. The normal evening chorus of insects and birds had diminished to near silence, with only occasional, isolated calls punctuating the stillness. "It's too quiet," I whispered, my voice sounding intrusive in the strange hush. Carter didn't respond. His attention focused entirely forward toward the eastern ridge. He consulted his compass, adjusted our course slightly, and moved ahead with such confidence that he might have been following a marked trail. But there was no trail here, just undergrowth and trees. "You seem to know exactly where we're going," I observed, ducking under a low-hanging branch. "I can feel it," Carter replied without turning. "It's pulling me." We walked for 20 minutes in silence. The forest grew denser, the space between trees narrowing until branches scraped against our jackets from both sides. I kept my flashlight beam trained on the ground, avoiding roots and rocks that threatened to trip us in the growing darkness. "How long have you been seeing this light?" I asked, navigating around a fallen log covered in phosphorescent fungi. 3 weeks, Carter replied without turning around. "At first, just glimpses, then dreams. Now I see it even when I'm awake." His voice carried a flat, monotonous quality that heightened my unease. Gone was the animated colleague who once enthusiastically pointed out rare bird species or discussed weather patterns. This version of Carter spoke like someone reading from a script. "Why didn't you report it sooner?" I asked. "I did. Sam told me to ignore it." This revelation stopped me short. Sam knew, and he didn't investigate? Carter continued walking without answering. An hour into our trek, my radio crackled to life, Sam's voice cutting through the unnatural silence of the forest. "Maya, regular check-in." I froze. Carter turned to look at me. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the talk button. Every part of my training demanded honesty, but something stronger. Concern for Carter, curiosity about the light, or perhaps simple fear of what Sam might do if he knew, pushed me toward deception. I pressed the button. All clear at the tower. Nothing to report. The lie tasted bitter. I waited for Sam's response, half expecting him to challenge my report. "Good. Next check-in at midnight. Dispatch out." The static died, leaving only the weight of my dishonesty hanging in the air. Carter gave me a small nod before turning and continuing forward. The terrain grew increasingly challenging. The gentle slopes of the eastern forest gave way to steep inclines and sudden drops. Our path narrowed until it became little more than a game trail, then vanished entirely. Yet Carter never slowed or hesitated. He moved forward with the certainty of someone who had walked this path 100 times. "You said you've never been here before," I called ahead, my breath coming faster as we climbed a particularly steep rise. "I haven't," he confirmed. "Then how do you know where to go?" Carter paused, turning to look at me. In the beam of my flashlight, his face appeared gaunt, the shadows deepening the hollows of his cheeks. "I just know." As we continued, I noticed a disturbing pattern in the surrounding vegetation. The trees began to exhibit unnatural formations, their trunks bent at odd angles, not from wind or natural growth patterns, but as if pulled by some invisible force. All leaned in the same direction, toward our destination. I stopped to examine one particularly twisted pine. Its trunk curved almost 90 degrees, starting straight from the ground before bending sharply eastward. The bark on the bent section appeared stretched and strained, like skin pulled too tight over bone. "Carter, look at these trees." He barely glanced at them. "They're showing us the way." His pace increased, forcing me to jog to keep up. His breathing had changed, becoming shallow and rapid. Not from exertion, I realized, but from excitement. He moved with the anticipation of someone approaching a long-awaited reunion. When we stopped to drink water, I trained my flashlight on Carter's face. What I saw sent a chill through me. His pupils had expanded to consume almost his entire iris, and within those black pools I caught a faint luminescence, a subtle glow that reflected light that didn't exist in our surroundings. "Your eyes," I whispered. Carter blinked rapidly and turned away. "We need to keep moving." The rational part of my mind finally caught up with our situation. We were miles from the tower, in unmarked forest, following a man whose behavior grew increasingly erratic, toward an unexplained phenomenon that had somehow altered him. "We shouldn't be doing this," I said, reality crashing down like a physical weight. "Let's go back." I took a step backward. Carter's hand shot out, grabbing my arm with painful force. His fingers dug into my flesh with strength I didn't know he possessed. "We're close," he hissed. "It wants us both." His grip tightened for one terrifying moment before he released me suddenly. Without another word, he turned and continued walking. I stood frozen, rubbing my arm where 4 distinct finger marks were already forming. The rational choice was clear. Turn back. Find my way to the tower. Radio for help. But as I looked behind me, the forest appeared unfamiliar, reshuffled somehow. The path we had forged had already been reclaimed by shadows and undergrowth. I wasn't certain I could find my way back alone. And beneath my fear lurked a stubborn curiosity. What had changed Carter? What power could bend trees and alter a man's eyes? I followed him, partly from concern for his mental state, partly from fear of becoming lost, and partly from a compulsion to understand what waited ahead. My flashlight beam wavered between the ground before me and Carter's back. Through the trees ahead, the first hints of the light appeared, pulsing with that same precision I had observed from the tower. But here, unfiltered by distance and glass, each pulse felt physical, a pressure wave that pushed against my skin and vibrated in my chest. The light grew stronger with each step, painting the forest in alternating waves of illumination and shadow. We were getting close. The forest grew denser as we continued our trek toward the pulsing light. We had been hiking for another mile when the character of our surroundings changed dramatically. A wall of fog materialized ahead of us, rising between the trees like a physical barrier. The mist hung suspended in the air with unnaturally defined edges. I stopped and stared. This wasn't normal weather behavior. Fog should drift with air currents and spread through the trees. This remained stationary, as if painted onto the landscape. Through its murky thickness, the amber light we'd been following pulsed with greater intensity, illuminating the mist from within. The temperature suddenly plummeted as we approached. My breath clouded in front of my face, a sudden 20-degree drop from just yards away. I grabbed Carter's sleeve. "Carter, this isn't right. Fog doesn't form like this." He didn't acknowledge me. His eyes remained fixed on the pulsing light beyond the fog wall. The amber glow reflected in his dilated pupils, giving him an inhuman appearance. His mouth hung slightly open, his expression vacant. Carter stepped forward mechanically, his movements stiff and unnatural, his head tilted at a precise angle that made my skin crawl. The motion reminded me of a bird studying something unusual, or a machine attempting to mimic human movement. "Can you hear it?" he whispered. "The humming. It's been in my head for weeks." I strained my ears, but detected nothing beyond the unsettling silence of the forest. The normal nighttime sounds had disappeared completely. No insects chirped. No leaves rustled. The silence pressed against my eardrums like physical pressure. I pulled my radio from my belt to check in with base. to report this weather anomaly, if nothing else. The display remained dark despite my attempts to power it on. I had replaced the batteries that morning. It should have worked perfectly. I checked my watch. The hands had frozen at exactly 11:17. I tapped the glass, but nothing happened. Carter moved into the fog without hesitation. I followed, keeping his silhouette in sight. The mist enveloped us, reducing visibility to just a few feet. It felt different from normal fog, thicker, almost viscous. It coated my skin with an oily residue that tingled unpleasantly. I wiped my face with my sleeve, but couldn't remove the sensation. Carter's behavior deteriorated further as we pushed through the dense mist. He began walking in perfectly straight lines, turning at exact right angles. His feet lifted and placed with robotic precision. No human moved this way naturally. It looked choreographed, as if something else controlled his movements. "Carter," I called, "we need to go back." He stopped and turned to face me. When he spoke, his voice sounded doubled, his familiar tone layered with something deeper, resonant, as if two voices emerged simultaneously from his throat. "We're invited," he said, pointing ahead with a rigid arm. "Special guests. The fire has been waiting for us." My heart hammered against my ribs. Every instinct screamed danger. Everything about this situation violated natural law. I should run, find my way back through the forest, and report what I'd seen. Yet curiosity pulled me forward like an invisible rope. What had changed Carter? What force bent trees and created unnatural fog? The light grew brighter ahead, pulsing with that same perfect 3-second rhythm. The fog thinned slightly, revealing the source of the light. Before us spread a perfect circle of cleared forest, too geometrically precise to have occurred naturally. No stumps remained where trees should have stood. The ground appeared swept clean of debris. Carter entered the clearing with ceremonial slowness. Despite my fear, I followed him into the space, drawn by a need to understand what we faced. The amber light pulsed stronger here, seeming to emanate from the very air at the center of the clearing. I stepped fully into the circle, the residue from the fog still clinging to my skin, my radio dead at my hip, and my watch frozen in time. Whatever waited here existed outside normal reality, and we had just accepted its invitation. Before me spread a perfect circle carved from the forest, exactly 50 yards in diameter. My ranger's eye, trained to spot natural patterns and irregularities, immediately registered the impossible precision. No forest clearing formed such a geometrically perfect circle. No natural process could space the perimeter trees at such mathematically exact intervals. The ground inside the circle had been swept clean of all debris. No fallen leaves, no twigs, no underbrush. Just bare, packed earth marked with intricate geometric patterns. Concentric circles intersected with straight lines and triangles, creating a complex design that seemed to pull my gaze toward its center. The patterns looked freshly carved, the exposed soil darker than the surrounding dirt. At the precise center burned what I first took to be a fire, but quickly realized was something else entirely. The flames rose in a perfect column, undisturbed by the breeze that rustled through the surrounding forest. The colors shifted in a hypnotic rhythm, transitioning from deep, smoldering orange to an electric blue that hurt my eyes. Despite its size and apparent intensity, I felt no heat radiating from it. The surrounding ground showed no scorch marks. No smoke rose from the flames. Carter walked several paces ahead of me into the clearing, his movements still possessing that unnerving mechanical precision. "It's beautiful," he whispered, his face bathed in the pulsing light. "It's been calling me, showing me things." He took several more steps forward, moving directly toward the column of flames. The strange fire seemed to respond to his approach, the pulses quickening like an excited heartbeat. "Carter, stop!" I shouted, lunging forward. My fingers brushed against the fabric of his jacket but couldn't get a grip. He turned back toward me. The serene smile on his face contrasted with the wild, dilated pupils of his eyes. The reflection of the flame danced across his features, but something else glowed from within him now. "It's not fire at all," he said, his voice calm and certain. "It's a door." Carter continued walking. The distance between us grew as my feet suddenly felt heavy. I wanted to run after him, but my body refused to cooperate. A strange pressure held me in place. The column of flames responded to Carter's approach. Tendrils of orange-blue light extended outward like searching fingers. Carter reached the edge of the fire and paused for just a moment. He turned to look at me one last time, that same serene smile fixed on his face. Then he stepped forward. I screamed as the flames engulfed him. My mind expected charred flesh, agonized screams, and the smell of burning hair. None came. Instead, Carter stood perfectly still within the column of fire, his body illuminated from within as if his skin had become translucent. The flame neither consumed nor damaged him, it transformed him. His eyes opened, now glowing with the same orange-blue light as the fire. His entire body pulsed in rhythm with the flame. When he turned to face me, his movements were fluid again, but not human. Too perfect, too graceful. He extended his hand toward me. His skin glowed from beneath, veins tracing patterns of light beneath the surface. "You should follow me," he said. The words seemed to vibrate inside my skull rather than travel through the air. "It wants us both." The fire column widened, creating a space beside Carter. The tendrils of flame reached toward me now, stretching across the impossible clearing, beckoning with gentle, mesmerizing movements. The pulsing light synchronized with my heartbeat, slowing it and calming my fear. I staggered backward as the impossible fire reached for me. The tendrils of flame stretched across the clearing, pulsing with hypnotic rhythm. "Maya," he called. "It's waiting for you too." Pure terror broke through the strange calm that had momentarily settled over me. When a tendril of orange-blue fire extended toward my face like a probing finger, I turned and ran. I crashed through the underbrush without direction or purpose, driven only by the primal need to put distance between myself and that thing. Branches tore at my jacket and face. I tripped over exposed roots but pushed myself up each time. The fog seemed thinner during my retreat, but no less disorienting. I plunged through it blindly, the moisture clinging to my skin with that same oily residue. My lungs burned with exertion as I pushed deeper into the forest, constantly glancing over my shoulder for signs of pursuit. Every tree looked identical. The unchanging pattern of pine and oak created a maddening sameness that twisted my sense of direction. My compass remained useless, the needle spinning wildly like it had forgotten the existence of north. My watch still displayed 11:17, frozen in time. Without working equipment and with the stars obscured by fog and tree canopy, I struggled to navigate. Hours seemed to pass in a panicked flight. My initial burst of adrenaline faded, leaving my muscles trembling with exhaustion. I slowed to a walk, then stopped to catch my breath against a large pine. The night had deepened to its darkest point. I guessed it must be close to dawn, though without functioning equipment I couldn't be sure. I rotated slowly, searching for any landmark that might orient me. The forest stretched identically in all directions, until I caught sight of something breaking the tree-lined silhouette. A tall, angular structure stood out against the pre-dawn sky. The lookout tower. Relief flooded through me. I pushed my exhausted body forward, stumbling toward the familiar structure. The clearing around the tower emerged from the trees, and I broke into a final, desperate run across the open ground. My legs burned with exhaustion as I reached the wooden stairs. I grabbed the railing and pulled myself upward, one step at a time, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The familiar creak of the steps offered a momentary comfort that was quickly overtaken by fear. I reached the platform and fumbled with my keys, hands shaking violently. Once inside, I slammed the door shut and dragged the small desk in front of it. The barricade wouldn't stop anything determined, but the illusion of security was something I desperately needed. I staggered to the radio station, collapsing into the chair. My hands trembled as I reached for the transmitter. The green power light glowed steadily. Unlike my personal radio, the tower equipment still functioned. I pressed the transmit button. Emergency at Blackridge Tower. Carter is... I paused, struggling to find words that wouldn't sound insane. Carter's gone. There's something in the forest. We need help. Static hissed through the speaker for several long seconds. I pressed the button again. This is Ranger Maya Wilson at Blackridge Tower. Emergency situation. Please respond. The static cleared and a voice broke through after a long pause. Sam's voice, eerily calm. Maya, we need you to return to the fire. My blood turned to ice. I stared at the radio, certain I had misheard. What? No, did you hear me? Carter walked into it. He's gone. You should follow him, Sam replied. The fire has chosen you both. It's an honor. I checked the radio frequency dial, confirming I was connected to headquarters on our standard emergency channel. This was impossible. Sam, what's happening? Who's making you say these things? You should follow me, Sam repeated, using the exact phrase Carter had spoken in the clearing. The radio then emitted a series of tones. 3 seconds on, 3 seconds off, that perfectly matched the pulsing pattern of the fire. The sound filled the small tower room, seeming to penetrate my skull and vibrate against my bones. I threw the radio down, backing away as it continued its rhythmic pulse. My heart hammered against my ribs as I moved to the windows, scanning the surrounding forest. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten with the first hints of dawn, providing enough light to see the base of the tower. Unnatural fog rolled between the trees, thicker than before, advancing toward the tower like a living entity. It pooled around the base of the structure, climbing up the supports. Something moved within the fog. A dark silhouette approached the base of the tower. A heavy thump echoed from below, followed by another. Something was on the stairs. Each impact resonated through the wooden structure, slow, methodical steps climbing toward me. Thump, thump, thump. The barricaded door wouldn't hold. I backed toward the western window, looking desperately for escape as the steps grew closer. The thumping continued up the stairs, footsteps that shook the entire tower. Dawn broke over the eastern ridge, but its light seemed dimmer than it should have been. I glanced outside to see why. The fog had completely encircled the tower, forming a perfect ring that cut the structure off from the rest of the forest. The morning sun struggled against the dense mist, casting an eerie twilight across the observation room. I needed something to defend myself. The tower didn't stock firearms, but there had to be something. I yanked open drawers, rifled through cabinets, and searched every corner of the small space while the footsteps drew closer. My fingers closed around a metal flashlight, heavy enough to use as a weapon if necessary. In another cabinet, I found a flare gun with 3 flares. The radio continued to emit those rhythmic tones, 3 seconds on, 3 seconds off, matching the pulse of the strange fire we had encountered. I yanked its power cord from the wall, but the tones continued, somehow broadcasting without electricity. Thump, thump, thump. The door shuddered under a heavy impact, the desk I'd pushed against it sliding an inch across the floor. I didn't have much time. My eyes fell on the logbook still open on the desk. The logs might contain information, clues about what was happening. I grabbed it, flipping through pages while keeping one eye on the door. The entries started normally enough. Routine reports of weather conditions, potential fire risks, wildlife sightings. But about 3 months ago, the tone changed. The first unusual entry came from a ranger named Melissa. Observed strange light in the eastern sector, pulsing pattern, reported to dispatch, no follow-up required. 2 weeks later, another entry. Second observation of eastern light. Dispatch advised to ignore. The entries grew more disturbing as I flipped forward. A ranger described personality changes in his lookout partner, noting increased fixation and unusual sleep patterns. Another documented trees bending in unnatural patterns near the eastern ridge. All reports were acknowledged by dispatch, by Sam. with the same instruction: ignore and maintain normal operations. Carter's entries began 6 weeks ago, initially professional and detailed. Then 3 weeks back, light visible again. Brighter this time, dreams about it. Told Sam. 2 weeks ago, light calling to me. Sam says ignore. Can't ignore. Need to understand. 1 week ago, his handwriting became erratic. The letters pressed so hard into the page they nearly tore through. They're opening a door. They need fire watchers who understand flames. The most recent entry was dated yesterday, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. 2 more for the fire. Thump. Crack. A powerful blow struck the door, splintering the wood around the hinges. The desk slid another foot. Through the crack, I glimpsed Sam's face, but not the Sam I knew. His eyes glowed with the same orange-blue fire that had consumed Carter, pulsing in that perfect rhythm. Behind him stood shadowy figures I recognized as other Forest Service employees, all moving with the same mechanical precision I had seen in Carter. Maya Wilson. Sam's voice resonated with that same doubled quality I'd heard from Carter. The fire has selected you. I backed away, my grip tightening on the flare gun. What have you done with Carter? Carter has transcended. You will join him. The door requires balance. The figures behind Sam moved forward in perfect unison. Through the widening crack, I counted 5 of them, all rangers or support staff I knew by name. Their eyes held the same fiery glow, their movements synchronized like parts of a single machine. What door? What are you talking about? I demanded, trying to buy time while my mind raced for a plan. Sam's head tilted at that unnatural angle. The vessels of flesh open the way. The watchers become the gateway. Another powerful blow hit the door, the desk skidding backward. The hinges tore free from the frame. I had seconds, not minutes. My gaze darted to the ceiling hatch that led to the roof. It was my only escape route. I shoved the flare gun into my jacket pocket, grabbed the logbook, and jumped to pull down the access ladder. It unfolded just as the door gave way completely. Sam stepped into the room, moving with fluid grace that seemed both beautiful and horrifying. His hand extended toward me, skin glowing from within just as Carter's had done in the flame. I scrambled up the ladder, pushing open the roof hatch and emerging onto the flat observation platform. The morning air bit at my face, but the sky directly above remained clear. Below, the fog formed a perfect circle around the tower, its edges too defined to be natural. Sam's head emerged from the hatch. I kicked at his hands, but he caught my foot with inhuman speed. His grip burned through my boot, not with heat, but with a strange energy that made my muscles spasm. I fell backward, hitting the roof hard. The fire has waited millennia, Sam said, climbing fully onto the roof. The others followed behind him, emerging one by one through the hatch. It needs those who watch, those who understand. I rolled away, coming to my feet at the edge of the roof. The drop to the ground looked impossibly far, with nothing but that unnatural fog below. I was cornered. Why us? Why lookouts? I asked, pulling the flare gun from my pocket. Fire watchers understand what others cannot, Sam replied. The patterns, the life within the flame. The fog below pulsed in rhythm with Sam's eyes, with the tones still emanating from the radio below. The patterns clicked together in my mind. The precision, the technology disguised as natural phenomena. This wasn't supernatural. It was something else. I aimed the flare gun directly at the fog below. The door requires balance, Sam repeated, advancing slowly. You will join... I fired. The flare arced downward, trailing red smoke. When it hit the fog, the world exploded. The mist ignited like gasoline, blue-orange flames racing in a perfect circle around the tower. The fire revealed metallic structures hidden within the fog, angular constructions that had been concealed by the mist. The burning fog released a high-pitched whine that drove needles of pain into my ears. Sam and the others froze in place, their bodies rigid. The fire in their eyes flickered. dimmed, then extinguished. They collapsed simultaneously onto the roof, like marionettes with cut strings. In the distance, the pulsing light that had first drawn Carter into the forest flared brilliantly, then vanished. The burning fog dissolved, leaving behind scorched earth and partially melted metal devices planted in a perfect circle around the tower. Sam stirred at my feet, his eyes normal again, confusion replacing the mechanical intensity. Maya? What happened? Where are we? I helped him sit up, noticing the others were regaining consciousness as well, all asking similar questions. None had any memory of their actions. Something was controlling you, I explained, looking out at the circle of destroyed technology surrounding us. All of you. Within hours, the forest was swarming with federal agents, FBI, CDC, military personnel, and unmarked vehicles. They quarantined the area, took statements, collected evidence. The authorities traced the technology to a research company called New Dawn, which had been conducting illegal experiments using quantum fields to harvest consciousness through forest ecosystems. They never found Carter. The search teams combed the eastern ridge for days, but there was no trace of him or the perfect clearing with its flame. It was as if both had been erased from existence. Sam and the others recovered fully, with no lasting effects beyond missing memories of their time under control. The official report cited experimental mind-altering technology and corporate espionage targeting federal land resources. I left the Forest Service 3 weeks later. The tower held too many memories, and the forest no longer felt like home. But I didn't stop investigating. I found patterns. Similar incidents in national parks, research stations, remote lookout posts, places where someone watches, observes, pays attention to patterns that others miss. The fire at Black Ridge hadn't been random. It had chosen its watchers carefully, and I now understood that some fires aren't meant to be watched. They're watching us instead. Every night since then, I've checked my eyes in the mirror, searching for the faintest flicker of orange-blue light. Every night, I've wondered if part of that fire still burns somewhere inside me, waiting to be kindled. And every night I've wondered if, somewhere, somehow, Carter is watching too.